Welcome to another movie plot and enjoy the memories. It begins in 1969 near the end of America's involvement in the Vietnam War. After Private Luke Deveraux and his team successfully secure a village, the scene turns to chaos when Luke finds soldiers and villagers dead with their ears hacked off. His sergeant Andrew Scott has gone insane and begun collecting ears around his neck as trophies from anyone he deems a traitor. Luke tries to reason with him saying that the war's over, which makes the sergeant think he's found another traitor and orders Luke to shoot 2 hostages to prove otherwise. When he refuses, Scott shoots the boy, so Luke knocks him back and attempts to save the girl, but he takes a bullet. As the girl attempts to flee, Sarge throws a grenade down the street at her, which blows her away and gets him impaled by Luke with his bayonet. They both open fire and blow each other away before dying together on the battlefield. The next morning, a U.S. Special Forces squad sent in to clean up the village and finds their bodies with the ears around Scott's neck. Trying to think of a way to explain this back home, the commanding officer orders to never discuss what happened with anyone and declare the bodies MIA. 25 years later, terrorists have taken over the Hoover Dam and taken several civilians hostage that they keep executing along with any police that approach. Local police are ordered not to make any attempt to rescue the hostages as Colonel Perry brings in an elite counter-terrorism unit called the Universal Soldiers. Members of the team include Luke along with Scott, who have been resurrected into agents GR-44 and GR-14. They have no memory of their previous lives and are sent in to dispatch several of the terrorists, but Scott uses excessive force, suggesting that despite being blank slate, Scott's actually enjoying it. Their camera feeds are transmitted back to the command post where the technicians watch the Unisouls entering the dam. They send in GR-76 in disguise as a maintenance man to show their physical abilities when he tanks automatic gunfire and still assists in eliminating the remaining terrorists. After the area is secure, Luke sees 2 hostages who resemble the villagers that Scott killed and begins to remember his former life. Scott also remembers, but as Unisouls they both remain quiet while ignoring commands from control over the radio. When they get back to the airport in the mobile command center, the Unisoul technicians try to figure out what happened while the soldiers are kept in a cold room due to overheating. They have a tendency to shut down, but Luke and Scott hadn't even broken a sweat yet, and now Luke just keeps saying that the couple were innocent. Technicians Woodward and Garth feel that it may be better to remove Scott and Luke from the team until they can be further analyzed, but Perry orders the Unisouls to inject themselves with neural serum to keep their minds under control and their previous memories suppressed. Meanwhile, journalist Veronica Roberts has followed the team to the tarmac in an attempt to get a story on the project. She was at the Hoover Dam incident but got nothing when speaking with representatives, so has decided to sneak onto the base with a camera to get more answers. She comes across the body of GR-76, who appears to be fatally wounded but sits up alerting command to her intrusion. While attempting to escape with her cameraman, the Unisouls cause them to crash and Luke and Scott are ordered to bring her back. Against orders, Scott executes the cameraman when he protects Veronica, and Luke has flashbacks again that coincide with him knocking back Scott and fleeing with the survivor. He briefly stops when his flashbacks end, but Veronica throws away Luke's headset, cutting him off from Perry and allowing her to order him to drive. Scott mumbles traitor to himself just like in Vietnam, but none of the Unisoul team hear him. Since they got an innocent cameraman killed, Woodward wants to come clean, but Perry resolves to chase the reporter across country and prevent knowledge of the Unisouls from getting out. The project's unknown to the Pentagon, as they wouldn't allow dead soldiers to be resurrected, and if the secret gets out they all go to jail. They mobilize the command center while Veronica asks Luke why he saved her, but he just says his tour's over and he wants to go home. The Unisoul uses a lighter to stop his bullet wound from bleeding, and when they run out of gas he gets out and pushes the car at high speed all the way to the nearest gas station. The pair hide out for the night at a motel, and Veronica attempts to contact the police, but none of the payphones work. The motel owner mentions that Luke doesn't look too good, so while Veronica tries to use the phone in the room, he attempts to cool himself down in front of the air conditioning unit. Even the room phone doesn't work, and a reporter on TV says that Veronica is wanted for the murder of her cameraman. She goes to use the employee phone, but Luke follows her into the parking lot naked and collapses from overheating. He requires Veronica to fill a bathtub full of ice to reduce his temperature and allow his wounds to rapidly heal. Veronica returns to the front office to use their employee phone, but their communications have been completely cut off by the arriving Unisoul team. Scott and the other Universal soldiers spot Veronica, but they follow her back to the motel room where Luke's now fully recovered. Along with GR-55, they open fire, narrowly missing the pair, and Luke charges through the drywall from room to room to escape until reaching a solid brick exterior. When the Unisouls enter, they find no sign of the pair and assume they lost them, but they've hid under the sheets of a couple in bed and sneak out behind them, avoiding Scott and the rest of the soldiers' gunfire. Veronica demands answers to who Luke is, but he doesn't remember anything or even notice that he has an accent. He pulls over to hop out and try remember anything he can, when noticing the mobile command center following and continuing on to the nearest gas station. They must be tracking him somehow, so Veronica looks over his body to locate a transmitting device that Luke cuts out. When the command center arrives, the Unisols come in shooting, but the place has been rigged to blow and 2 soldiers are set on fire. As the technicians leave the truck to put them out, Luke and Veronica emerge from trunks full of ice that hid their heat signature and sneak on board the truck to steal evidence on the program. They also kept the gas station attendant safe, but when they get back on the road, Scott jumps Luke, having been hiding in the back seat, but is thrown through the windscreen when the car crashes and loses the pair again. Perry orders GR-14 back to the truck, but he says that his name's Sergeant Andrew Scott and outdraws the colonel, shooting him dead. Scott's previous personality begins to emerge when he takes Perry's ears back to the technicians and takes over the Unisol program. An agent attempts to stop him, but Scott kills him, as well as any technicians who try to fight back, leaving Woodward and Garth under new management. The super soldier begins injecting himself with muscle enhancers and making a new necklace before being told by Woodward that he's overheating. He does this to allow Garth to inject Scott with the forget-me juice, but he's caught and Scott drives the needle through the back of the technician's head. Meanwhile, Veronica's looking over the evidence and gets the phone number of the Unisol program's creator, while Luke relearns about food. While the reporter gets the originator's location on a payphone outside, Luke racks up a large bill that he's unable to pay. The waitress calls in the chef, but he gets beaten badly along with anyone else who tries to get in the way of the Unisol's meal, until Veronica's alerted by a patron flying through the window. They leave the scene, and sometime later the Unisols arrive, with Scott asking for directions from anybody who saw them. When becoming uncooperative, Scott knocks out 3 men and takes the 4th for everything he's got, including his belt buckle. On board the truck, Woodward makes GR-76 hold a live grenade until it goes off as his final attempt at stopping the program. It manages to kill GR-55, who's unable to be revived again, but 76 recovers in the freezer at a supermarket and eats raw meat to regain his strength. Scott announces his rank in the U.S. Army and begins talking to the store patrons about traitors in their midst, just like in Vietnam. He shoots 2 arriving security guards dead, claiming them to be traitors, and wants any excuse to kill the patrons. During this time, Luke and Veronica get to the house of a Dr. Gregor to learn about the history of the project. He says that the Universal Soldiers were a result of reanimating tissue, but they couldn't prevent them overheating and are still technically dead. Luke wanted to go home at the time of his death, so he's generally placid, but Scott suffers from what they call regressive traumatic recall and believes that he's still fighting in Vietnam. Luke and Veronica go to a nearby station where Luke tries to put Veronica on a bus to LA since Scott's only after him, but she decides to stay and they're both arrested by local authorities. They're transferred by police bus, but Scott catches up and begins running cops off the road and shooting up the bus in an attempt to get to his target. As Luke breaks his way into the front seat to replace the dead driver, Veronica tosses any grenades Scott throws back out the windows. Just as they come up on a cliff, Luke takes control of the wheel and throws Veronica out for safety before a grenade flips it. Scott orders 76 to run the bus off the cliff, but Luke shoots the driver dead, causing the whole Unisol command center to go over the edge with Scott inside. Having learned of his past, Luke wants to go home to meet his family in Louisiana when a local officer attempts to arrest the pair. Veronica knocks him out herself and decides to drive Luke home, where he sees his parents for the first time in 25 years. While he reunites with his family, Veronica is going to leave when Scott shows up, having tracked them down and takes them all hostage. He calls out Luke, who confronts his sergeant, and they have a hand-to-hand fight where Scott's muscle enhancers sees him easily defeat Luke. When he begins toying with Veronica, she manages to escape from her bonds and flee, so Scott throws a grenade at her just like the girl in Vietnam. Luke gets back up, but Scott continues to dominate him, throwing him into the barn before preparing to kill him in front of his parents, but Luke gets a hold of Scott's enhancers and injects himself, giving him the newfound strength to fight back. He dropkicks Scott through the side of the barn, then kicks him back, impaling him on the spikes of a giant grinder. When Scott seems to be dead, Luke approaches, but the sergeant grabs his head and presses it towards a spike, so Luke breaks his arm and activates the machine, grinding Scott into little pieces. Luke frees his parents, then checks on Veronica to find that she survived the explosion and was just knocked unconscious. She asks how Luke feels, to which he replies like a 50-year-old man, before the two embrace. And the movie ends.